So this video is meant as a tutorial to show you how to make a basic roux and then incorporate that roux into a sauce. So I'm starting with whole butter. I know that some recipes call for clarified butter. We haven't covered that yet, but I'm starting with whole butter since I'm not making a dark roux, I'm making a blonde roux. So I have in here 2 ounces of butter and a half a cup of flour. This makes a rather dry roux. As you can see, it's just a little bit crumbly. It's not too bad. I would recommend when you make your first roux, put just a touch more butter in it or a little less flour, one of the two, and make it a little bit wetter so it runs just a little bit. The dry roux are good, but they're a little bit harder to work with, as you'll see in this video. I kind of shot myself in the foot a little bit, and my roux was just a touch dry, and I cooked this one a little fast. This stove, I'm going to blame the stove. It's a little hard for me to regulate the heat, so it cooked a little quicker than I wanted. So what I'm doing here is I'm pulling out a little bit of roux at 5 minutes of cook time to show you what the color is. And then here in a sec, I'm going to pull out another little bit of roux at 8 minutes of cook time. And there's a pretty significant difference of the difference. So, so here it is, it's 8 minutes. I'm going to pull out a little bit, and I took a picture of it and I posted that picture in the module so you can see the difference. So this roux is really about the color that I want it. So I'm going to switch from my spoon to my whisk, and I'm going to pour in a little bit more than a cup. It's a little bit more than half of that pint jar, and I'm going to whisk it really vigorously. And I'm going to whisk it hard and make sure that it gets really thick and that all the liquid is incorporated in there. You see how thick that's getting? It should be really almost hard to stir. So I'm being sure also to get into the corners so I don't have any roux hiding in the corners. So I will occasionally tap my whisk on the pan to knock out any roux that's caught in the middle. So once that's incorporated, now I'm going to add maybe another half a cup, a little less. So you want to start very thick and slowly in stages incorporate your liquid. And be sure each stage is fully incorporated before you add more. Because if you add more and you haven't incorporated the previous stage yet, that's when we get lumps. So you can see it's getting a little bit smoother. It's getting to the stage, this is what I call the mashed potato stage. It looks a little bit like mashed potatoes. It's not quite as thick as it was when we started, but it's still quite thick. So I'm going to add the rest of that pint and then a little bit of the next pint. I'm making a quart here. So I whisk that in, and then I'll add a little bit more and I'll let that simmer. You want the heat to come back between additions of stock. If you add your stock too quickly, then you really slow down this gelatinization process, and your sauce ends up just really being too thin and it's really hard to get thick. So we add the liquid in stages and let the heat come back between stages. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing my first check on thickness and consistency. And you can see when I lift it up out of the pot, I can draw little lines on top of the surface, and then I dip it in to see how much it coats the spoon. That tells me how thick it is. Now I'll wipe my finger across the back of it like that to see if the sauce clings, if it stays, or if it runs down into that little blank area that I just made. So now I'm adding the last of my stock. This is both pints. This is a full quart of stock in here now, and I'm going to let it simmer. I let it simmer for about 20 minutes, and I kept coming back to it and stirring. You don't want it to scorch to the bottom of the pot. So again, I'm checking consistency and seeing how it is. Unfortunately, Chef Jim gets a B on this sauce because it has lumps. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to strain it out. We want to make sure that we don't have lumps going in, and then we can skip this step. But unfortunately, mine did have lumps and I couldn't work them out. So at that point, your only choice is to strain it out. So I've strained it out, I've rewashed my pot, and I'm going to put my sauce back in my pot to let it simmer just a little while longer to make sure that it's fully cooked out and that it's as thick as it's going to get. It's fully gelatinized from the starch. So I'll pour that back, and again, I'll let it simmer. And then I'll check it one more time for consistency, and then I'll taste it. And then I'll add my salt and my pepper and whatever else I think that it might need for a basic velouté. As it is, I could use this on biscuits, I could use this on fried chicken, mashed potatoes, rice, whatever I wanted to. It's almost like a gravy. Now, of course, you're going to take half of this and make something else out of it. You can add mushrooms to it, you can add onions to it, you can add fresh herbs like parsley. There's lots of variations. So make a quart like I did and then split it. And then you can make 2 different sauces from this. You only have to make 1 variance from this, but you could make 2 if you wanted to. So that is a basic velouté. This will thicken as it sits. It's a little bit thin. Of course, if you wanted it thicker, you could add just either more roux or less stock.